words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be always acceptable to you, O God, our strength and our salvation. Amen. Please be seated. In a great many Episcopal churches, All Saints' Day is understood, above all, as a day to remember our beloved dead. And it is surely right and good to remember our dead, which we will do just a bit later in our service. But when we commingle our observances of All Souls' Day and All Saints' Day, something important, I think, can end up getting lost. Indeed, the Protestant inclination to call all Christians saints, while a much-needed corrective to the excesses of the Roman Catholic saint-making process, neglects the reality that we humans learn best by example. And as a result, in every generation, it is imperative to identify diverse and contextual examples of what holy and faithful living can look and feel like. It is vital, I think, to notice and name and celebrate a multitude of faithful exemplars, both those who lived before us as well as those who live among us. In other words, we need saints, and the more, the better. The Protestant reformers were right, I think, that sainthood cannot be an exclusive esoteric club. Sainthood cannot be something so removed that everyday Christians cannot imagine aspiring to it. Indeed, I think each Christian person ought to aspire to saintliness, if only in an asymptotic way. The remainder of today's homily, then, will be an extended excerpt on the theme of how to become a saint, taken from Thomas Merton's New Seeds of Contemplation. Merton, who died in 1968, was a Catholic monk, a prolific writer, and a man of many contradictions. Likely too complex to ever be made a saint by the Vatican, Merton nevertheless invited everyday Christians like us into an exploration of the contemplative life and a deeper life with God. And for that reason, he is a saint to me. So let's listen to his wisdom. It is true to say that for me, sanctity consists in being myself, and for you, sanctity consists in being yourself, and that, in the last analysis, your sanctity will never be mine, and mine will never be yours, except in the communism of charity and grace. For me, to be a saint means to be myself. Therefore, the problem of sanctity and salvation is, in fact, the problem of finding out who I am and of discovering my true self. Trees and animals have no problem. God makes them what they are without consulting them, and they are perfectly satisfied. With us, it is different. God leaves us free to be whatever we like. We can be ourselves or not as we please. Our vocation is not simply to be, but to work together with God in the creation of our own life, our own identity, our own destiny. We are free beings and children of God. This means to say that we should not passively exist, but actively participate in God's creative freedom in our own lives and in the lives of others by choosing the truth. To put it better, we are even called to share with God the work of creating the truth of our identity. We can evade this responsibility by playing with masks, and this pleases us because it can appear at times to be a free and creative way of living. It is quite easy, it seems, to please everyone, but in the long run, the cost and sorrow come very high. To work out our own identity in God, which the Bible calls working out our salvation, is a labor that requires sacrifice and anguish, risk, and many tears. It demands close attention to reality at every moment and great fidelity to God as God reveals God's self obscurely in the mystery of each new situation. We do not know clearly beforehand what the results of this work will be. The secret of my full identity is hidden in God. God alone can make me who I am, or rather, who I will be, when at last I fully begin to be. But unless I desire this identity and work to find it with God and in God, the work will never be done. The way of doing it is a secret I can learn from no one else but God. There is no way of attaining to the secret without faith. Every one of us is shadowed by an illusory person, a false self. This is a person that I want myself to be, but who cannot exist, because God does not know anything about him or her. And to be unknown of God is altogether too much privacy. My false and private self is the one who wants to exist outside the reach of God's will and God's love, outside of reality and outside of life. And such a self cannot help but be an illusion. We are not very good at recognizing illusions, least of all the ones we cherish about ourselves, the ones we are born with and which feed the roots of sin. For most people in the world, there is no greater subjective reality than this false self of theirs, which cannot really exist. A life devoted to the cult of this shadow is what is called a life of sin. All sin starts from the assumption that my false self, the self that exists only in my own egocentric desires, is the fundamental reality of life, to which everything else in the universe is ordered. Thus, I use up my life in the desire for pleasures, the thirst for experiences, for power, honor, knowledge, and love. To clothe this false self and to construct its nothingness into something objectively real. I wind experiences around myself and cover myself with pleasures and glory like bandages in order to make myself perceptible to myself and to the world. The secret of my identity is hidden in the love and mercy of God. But whatever is in God is really identical with God, for God's infinite simplicity admits no division and no distinction. Therefore, I cannot hope to find myself anywhere except in God. Ultimately, the only way that I can be myself is to become identified with the one in whom is hidden the reason and fulfillment of my existence. Therefore, there is only one problem on which all my existence, my peace, and my happiness depend: to discover myself in discovering God. If I find God, I will find myself. And if I find my true self, I will find God.